Well, good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Excellent. I thought it was a really wonderful start. What a powerful panel. And it's because Monty was so great, we thought, hey, how about an encore performance in our second panel? Because we know he's adept at many different topics, and I know this one that we're going to talk about next is really near and dear to his heart, as well as really with John Kerr as well. So my name is Barbara Endl. I'm a senior director at Jobs for the Future. We're a nonprofit intermediary based in Boston, and for us, we've been around almost 30 years, and we have a mission around economic and social mobility for students. And so we have a lot of passion and do a lot of work managing projects for philanthropy, as well as managing different projects for Department of Ed, Department of Labor, and other organizations, again, helping really build our knowledge economy with workers and skilled laborers, et cetera. This next session is really one that's a really important one for the philanthropic community, as well as both our nation, for the researchers, the policymakers, the practitioners. And this is focusing and advancing students that are what we consider underprepared learners. So this one is really about how do we get, I don't know if I'm a big fan of the term low-skilled, but really underprepared learners, both in and through upskilling opportunities, et cetera, and into good paying jobs, especially, as Joe mentioned, and I know, Davis, you cringe, but the middle skill economy, it's still 54% of the U.S. labor market, and living wages for students. So again, I think we all agree about the continuum of students. So when we talk about a low-skilled or an underprepared learner, like who are we talking about? Let me help you with that. So, maybe for most of us, we've had both assets and networks and things where we've gone to a four-year college and beyond, but these are the sorts of programs that are primarily delivered through a thing called adult education. And John is a state director. Monty has been working in that system before. So these are students that may not necessarily have their high school diploma or their GED, and they're federally and state funded programs that help students build their foundational learning skills and then eventually, hopefully, get on their career pathway and keep going up the ladder. So what I would like to do is essentially set the stage for just a few minutes and then really turn it over to, our panel. And we've got, they'll each deliver, as in the first panel, 8 to 10 minutes of some opening remarks and really talk about some of the innovative work that they're doing. And then we've got a set of questions I'll ask them to get the ball rolling. But really, I think that the magic here and what's the most important is for you to ask your questions. And then I'll end the session about 11:40 or so by asking both our panelists, what do they think is the future sort of trends in the field, and how, again, can philanthropy help support those efforts. Does that sound good, guys? Good. So it's very interesting to me. I definitely agree with Amber. There are 36 million reasons why we need to focus, especially on this population. And it's very interesting to me, too, because there are 36 million Americans, that have some college credit but no degree. But also at the same time, there's this parallel population, which I call a silent crisis. 36 million Americans with at or below basic literacy. And nearly half of our workforce, so ages 18 to 64, with at least facing one educational barrier. So we're looking at a workforce that, compared to international standards, when we look at other OECD countries, we're 17th. So there's a measure that's released every 2 years called the PIAC study. And again, in America here, we are not as well adept as other countries are around the literacy of our workforce. So that's a big problem. Certainly, what unites this panel is our passionate commitment to equip and activate more learners. And again, I thought the point was such a good one this morning, that high school students and that matriculation into the workforce, they're very important, and that's a powerful group. But there are many, many millions of Americans, adult learners, who just kind of need a leg up to help themselves and to do better for themselves and their families. And the kind of mindset that I think we on the panel share is this is not the fault of our students or underprepared adult learners. The system is really broken to provide them both the access into college. So I think Monty mentioned this, like, why do we require a high school diploma or a GED before you get into college? That's generally the case across the country. But what unites this group here is we've been working with a powerful set of models and innovations and changed mindset that students can actually do more than the same thing at once. And so the conversations, which I thought were so good from our Denver folks here around dual enrollment for high school students and the powerful work that Dr. Ballinger is doing at Lorain County Community College, we're actually doing innovative work around how we can apply that same model to our adult learners, right? Because time is the enemy. So students who don't, dropped out and don't have their high school diploma or their GED, generally in traditionally delivered programs, they have to get that first. That can take years. Then they may get placed into developmental education at the community college. They're likely to enter that black hole and not finish. And then finally, after many years, enter their program of study where they have an interest. Well, you can assume, like I do, that that's generally a very small percent of students. Nationally, only 3 to 6% of students that start in what we call the adult education programs ever get that post-secondary credential. Well, we kind of think, the three of us, plus many more across the country, a 97% non-success rate is kind of a big problem. So what are we going to do about it? So I would really like then to start with John and then Monty next, to really let these innovators and these state leaders talk about how they're working with their underprepared adult learners, why it's important, and what kind of models that we're working on that are really showing promise. Because co-enrolling at the same time between an adult education program when you're learning your foundational learning together in college has really been early promise and evidence, and we think it's a really good bet around continuing that movement and that work. So without further ado, let me introduce John Kerr. So John is the State Director of Adult Education in Washington State and a huge pioneer in the field and has really helped so many of us across the country rethink the capabilities and the kind of systems change around adult learners. So John, let me have you start us off.
Well, good morning, and first and foremost, I want to thank all of you. The work you do is unbelievably life-changing. In Washington State, Integrated Basic Education and Skills Training, or what we call IBEST, has truly changed the world of basic skills, developmental education, academic transfer, and workforce education, giving access like never before to our basic education adults. IBEST transformed the way we educate low-income, low-skilled, and immigrant adults to ensure their families' empowerment and economic well-being. And we know from research that the children who come from those more highly educated families are 10 times more likely to be successful. IBEST provides students with both academic and workforce skills needed to increase their opportunities for advancement upon a very clearly defined and guided pathways, at the same time as they're earning college credits, certificates, and degrees. Considering the future workforce challenges that we face in Washington State, IBEST has been identified as the critical piece in meeting our state's current and future workforce needs. Primary among the challenges in Washington State is the fact that while our workforce need for trained employees with college credentials will increase by almost 60% by 2030, our population in our state will grow by only 10%. And today, in 2016, 3/4 of the jobs in Washington State require at least a post-secondary credential. And over the next 20 years, there simply won't be enough high school graduates to meet the higher education needs of our state workforce. Washington will need to fill that gap with our out-of-school youth and our working age adults. There are adult basic education students, and after 11 years, we know that IBEST is the critical element to making this happen. I want to talk a little bit about how this IBEST thing began. The America's Perfect Storm research that was done by the Educational Testing Service had found that baby boomers are leaving the workforce in great numbers and will continue to do so, and that those individuals are our skilled workforce. The research also found that today's vacant jobs require more and higher level skills, and that the United States does not and will not have the trained workforce and skilled workers to meet those needs. 11 years ago, it was realized that this was a reality in Washington State as well, and this finding became Washington State's perfect storm and drivers for real change in our state. What we did, the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges knew that we needed to make a statewide, systematic change that was not just another innovative idea that would be shelved and forgotten. We told the legislature, give us the funds and we can solve the problem. Of course, our legislature said, well, prove it. So with the help of Lumina and the Ford Foundation and the incredible work of Davis Jenkins and David Prince, our researcher, we dug into our data to find the solution that we could provide. Perhaps the most significant result of the study was that it clearly identified what success looked like. It identified the greatest increase in economic attainment of being 1 year of college-level credits plus a credential. This became known as the tipping point for students needing to find a living wage job. What the study did is it tracked 35,000 working age adults in Washington that came to the community and technical college system with a high school education or less over English language learners. 6 years after starting college, the highest value added for work success was realized by those students that reached that tipping point, that 1 year of college plus a credential. For English language learners, that meant $7,000 earnings bump annually. And for adult basic education, $8,500. The study also found that the jobs that need that 1 year of college level credit and a credential were among those in greatest demand in our state. So the legislature, of course, then wanted to know, so how are you doing at getting students to that tipping point? And here's the ugly truth. We found that up and down the educational pipeline, the 2-year system was hemorrhaging working age adults with a high school education or less. The good news was one-third of every new class entering the community and technical college were made up of prime working age adults with a high school diploma or less. But 5 years after beginning, 80% of our adult basic education and English language learning students made modest skill gains. At best, they earned a GED but went no further. 7 out of 10, 70% of our workforce and transfer students who entered with a GED left with less, most a lot less than the tipping point. And 2/3 of our students who entered with a high school diploma completed left with less, some a lot less than that 1 year of college plus a credential. This was truly an honest look at how poorly we were doing at getting people to that tipping point, and it absolutely floored us as educators. We really didn't know what to do. So Washington State called in the experts. The state board brought in experts in integration from across the nation to help us plan how to get students to that tipping point. And out of the groundbreaking work with these experts, the IBEST strategy was born. And once implementation was begun, there was absolutely no turning back. What we did, in 2005, the state board scraped together dollars using Perkin funds and workforce investment funds to fund 10 pilots. And out of that work, the IBEST model was tested over and over and solidified. Then in order for IBEST to be taken to scale, move it into every single college in our state, the state board identified a need for an ongoing funding model that was simple and would provide the funds for the team teaching, 2 teachers in the classroom, and the wraparound services that had really become the signature of IBEST. So out of that need, the state board identified what we call a 1.75 full-time equivalent funding. it funded IBEST students at almost double that traditional rate. What it did, the 1.0 paid for the content instructor, so the professional technical instructor or the academic instructor. Then the 0.5 paid for the second teacher in the team teaching environment, and 0.25 paid for the additional wraparound services. The legislature was actually blown away by the success, and they, that first year and continuing from that time, put in $5 million to support this new funding model. The legislature also next wanted to know, so if IBEST is so successful, why aren't you doing more of it? And the programs identified financial aid to students for tuition, fees, and books as the biggest obstacle to expansion and scaling the program. So in 07-08, the legislature established the Opportunity Grant. It provides $11.5 million every year for tuition, fees, and books for up to 1 year of college-level credits. It ensures that IBEST students, our students without a high school diploma or GED, have the funding to get them all the way to the tipping point. So I want to talk a little bit about what IBEST looks like in the classroom. Team teaching is at the heart of IBEST success. Washington's IBEST programs puts a basic skills instructor in the same classroom with a career technical or academic instructor to teach jointly both the basic skills and workforce skills that have been identified as critical by employers. This team teaching approach allows students to earn those critical basic skills and earn college-level credentials and degrees at the same time as they're completing their basic skills. And this is what creates the accelerated pathway to a family-sustaining job. Students are no longer stuck in years of ABE classes and English language learning classes. They're actually earning college credits while they're preparing for work. Then all of our IBEST programs are required to collaborate with community and social service agencies to make academic, economic, and social support services easily accessible to students who we all know their life challenges put them at risk for not completing their education. And IBEST has been successful beyond anything we ever expected. Sadly, before IBEST, 5 years after entering a community or technical college, 3 to 6% of our basic skills students earned a college certificate or degree or reached that tipping point, 3 to 6%. But the IBEST revolution changed that. When compared to other basic skills students in workforce programs, Columbia University, the College Career Readiness Research, the College Career Research Center, Davis, found that IBEST students are 3 times more likely to earn college credits and 9 times more likely to earn a credential. IBEST students more than double quarterly earnings when compared to traditional basic education students and are employed at double the hours per week. IBEST students have also become the driving force behind increased student achievement in our state. Last year, IBEST students earned 92% of the certificates and degrees accrued by basic skills students, and were 83% of basic skills students reaching the tipping point. And it continues to expand and scale up. This year alone, we've seen a 21% increase in enrollment. Over the last 3 years, IBEST enrolled over 11,500 students. Those students earned 5,694 certificates and degrees. Remember, these are students that wouldn't be in college level ever, or it would have taken them 6 years in the past. Those students generated 50,000 performance points. That's how we get funding in our state, our performance funding. Let me put that into perspective for you. On average, an IBEST student earns 5.2 performance points per student. In our old model, basic skills students earned at best 0.8. Now they own 5.2. An academic transfer student earns 2. IBEST students earn the highest percentage points of any population, any student in our entire community and technical college system. Our current comprehensive IBEST pathways provide on-ramps to students for our lowest 3 levels, level 1, 2, 3 of ABE and ESL. In our state, every student is required to be on a college and career pathway or they're not enrolled. When students are ready, they move into their first quarter of IBEST with tuition funded by the Opportunity Grant, TANF funds, food stamp funds, or by foundations. And that allows them to earn the first 6 college-level credits successful. That allows them to move on to ability to benefit option of federal financial aid in their second quarter. In that second quarter, once the IBEST students are on ability to benefit, still no high school diploma or GED, they can continue to access Opportunity Grant, move on to our State Need Grant, and continue to use those funding sources all the way up to a 2-year degree. In Washington State, upon receiving a 2-year degree, they merely check a box and receive a high school diploma. Those same funding sources can then be used for them to transition into one of our applied baccalaureate programs at the community college or transfer to a 4-year university. You know, IBEST is truly, truly a pathway out of poverty for our students. By 2019, we know that 2/3 of all new jobs in Washington will require at least 1 year of college education plus a credential. And IBEST is equipping students with the skills and training to lead family wage jobs and really grow our economy. It's been an amazing experience, and it's been great to work with both Louisiana and JFF on this work across the nation.
So let me just have that sink in for just a moment and have you sort of visualize. So IBEST students are generally students that don't have their high school diploma or GED, and they've historically been placed into what we call these traditional standalone adult education programs, working on math, English, reading, etc., in isolation. IBEST actually takes that very same student and co-enrolls them into college classes, welding, industrial maintenance, healthcare, whatever is in demand, so that those students now are college students at the same time, and contextualizes the instruction. I'm sure you'll touch on that a little bit later. That very model has really helped now thousands of students in a better system to really untap that potential. As a result, we've had a consortium of funders that has taken the work from IBEST and we've expanded it into now 7 other states, right? Liza has helped with that in Louisiana. We've had a consortium of funders, including the Joyce Foundation, Matt, help in some of our Midwest states. So there are now 7 additional states in an initiative called Accelerating Opportunity that I've had the privilege to be the national project director and manage the last 5 years. I think we kind of have the beginnings of a movement with now 85 community colleges nationally are engaged in this work in a cluster of states. And it's all about, let's accelerate that time. You don't have to do these standalone programs. Let's accelerate the learning. Let's get the students into programs they're interested in. Let's not teach math in places where they don't really care. It all relates to what they're doing, and making sure that's aligned to industry. So John, really thank you for being the pioneer for a decade where we're standing on your broad shoulders to try to really help others think this way. So Monty, let's go to you, my friend. Thank you for doing an encore performance. And I'm sure you've got a few thoughts around this accelerating opportunity work, but mostly around underprepared learners, et cetera. So go ahead.
No doubt, and you guys get to measure to see if I am indeed a one-trick pony, right? Because back to back, I think I said everything in the last session that I had to say. But with all seriousness, in the season of commencements and graduations, I want to encourage you. I want to challenge you. If you have not attended a graduation ceremony of an adult basic education program, go. It's as much of a religious experience as any one of us has on a Sunday. Trust me. It will fundamentally change how you view this population. So let me tell you, my good friend Bob Templin, great to see you, sir. Let me tell you a little bit about why I'm so passionate about adult basic education. My father quit school in the 6th grade. Today, he has not gone back to finish any formal education. He still doesn't have a high school diploma, and he's proud of it. And this wall could be filled with certifications that he's earned over the years. Those certifications earned him a living, helped to educate me. My wife quit school in the 10th grade. Today, a registered nurse, every single day, gets up and goes to work, not because she has to, but because she wants to now. It is personal. It is a population of people we have created in this nation, the greatest educational caste system known to man, where every single level of education looks down on the other. It is the biggest obstacle to social mobility. It is the biggest obstacle to economic mobility in this nation. And so this work becomes very much of a proselytizing kind of effort. And so as you see people talk about the work within adult basic education, understand that the passion comes from a very purposeful place. So in Louisiana, 2010, I mentioned the demographics to you a few minutes ago. I'll remind you, 4.6 million people, 2.3 million working age adults, 600,000, 26% of our working age adults with no high school diploma. It is a weight around our neck economically that we cannot survive in a state where 84% of the jobs require some form of post-secondary education. You have to begin to think about importing skills if you're going to be economically viable as a state, or educate the people that are there. In 2010, we put forth an effort to fundamentally change adult basic education. In the years prior, K-12 education had managed the adult ed effort. And here's what that looked like. Student attended K-12 education, things didn't go so well for them, they drop out, and ultimately they decide they want to go back and get their GED. And so where do they go? Back to the same elementary or high school that they dropped out of. Think of that for a second. I've got to find the courage to go back to that school, and when I get there, guess who I run into? My 3rd grade teacher. Because as they moved through the chain and they found a way to get to an adult ed spot that paid them a little more money, that got their retirement benefit up, I'm going to run into the same teacher that I didn't do so well with in learning to read. The message that we're sending is you have obstacle after obstacle after obstacle that we're placing in front of you. And so we were able to move that adult basic education function over to community and technical colleges and fundamentally change with the help of John, with the help of the folks at JFF, with a number of people around the nation, able to pull together a concept that wasn't adult basic education 2.0. It was something we refer to as Work Ready U. Because it's not about gaining this certificate that you hang on the wall that says I am college ready, I've completed high school equivalency. What the heck does that mean? It doesn't buy you much even down at McDonald's, right? It doesn't buy you the kind of job that will sustain a family in this economy. And so we began to think about skills as opposed to a GED or now a high set or whatever form of the high school equivalency you may be pursuing. So from 2010 to today, here's some of the changes that have occurred in Louisiana. In 2009's data set, we served about 32,000 students in our adult basic education population. 2/3 of those were what I would refer to as out-of-school youth. In an accountability environment, many of you know the K-12 world. In a school accountability environment, one of the easiest ways for a school principal to drive up their accountability score is to eliminate the risk. And where did they land? They landed in our adult basic education programs. And so we found ourselves spending a limited state and federal dollar on a population that was out-of-school youth. Now, someone has to serve that population, no question. But was that the right group to be trying to solve the 600,000 person problem that we have in Louisiana? Absolutely not. So we redirected those resources toward the 600,000. We redirected it toward adult basic education programming that included first skills, then high school equivalency, if the student wanted the high school equivalency. It's a student's option. The second thing that happened, we developed career pathways through the Accelerating Opportunities effort. The work that John has done, in fact, as we loaded on the bus this morning, we were talking about a training session that John and some of his colleagues provided in Baton Rouge. I won't forget that, 2011, 2012 timeframe. As we're trying to figure out what this adult education effort is all about, the folks were able to come in and train us on the IBEST model. Extraordinary model. It is transformational, not just in the adult basic education arena, but in education in general. The challenge that we had in Louisiana was this. It is an expensive model to operate. As John pointed out, Washington State was smart in making strategic investments in the right place. We simply didn't have the resources in Louisiana. And so we've taken an IBEST light kind of approach. And the light goes something like this. If I have only one thing that I can provide for an adult student as they walk through the door, it is a skill that gets them a job. This population is not a group of academically challenged people. Get that out of your mind. These are smart people. They are more motivated than you and I in many instances. And I've explained to you why a little bit earlier, because it is an economic motivation, because there are people depending upon them. So the programs that we're offering to this population have to be on the money. They have to be the right programs at the right time. You see, a little bit of a sidebar here. I think our student success agenda in this nation is misguided. We're spending a lot of time, money, effort trying to push students through programs, when it's not about pushing students through developmental sequences or pushing students through associate degrees or bachelor's degrees for that matter. It's about the economic pull on the back end. Offer the right program and we will not have the challenges of completion. The student success agenda needs to be turned around in the opposite direction, not looking from the start toward the finish, but thinking about the end from the very beginning. Students will finish if there is a real substantive gain at the other end, particularly the adult student. So as we have moved through this process, a couple of policy changes that have occurred, I mentioned earlier, today you don't need a high school diploma in order to enroll in one of our 13 community and technical colleges. It simply doesn't make sense. It is a requirement in most colleges across the nation for one reason, because it's a requirement for Title IV. And we want to make sure that no one who enters our institution can access Title IV. Second policy change. We now have authority to be able to grant the alternative high school equivalency. And by doing so, a student who comes into our institution completes the developmental education sequence, automatically granted the high school diploma. Student who walks into our institution and completes a certificate, we identify the appropriate certificates, automatically granted a high school diploma. If the skill set is such that we were previously requiring it for those, we're requiring the high school diploma for those entering the program, and they completed the program, and the goal of high school, by the way, we talked about this a second ago, if the goal of high school was completion in college, and they accomplished that, why would we not provide them with a high school diploma or equivalency? Really kind of seems a bit crazy, doesn't it? So continue down that path. You heard John talk a second ago about the federal financial aid access for those without high school diploma. As I mentioned to you, as Louisiana was decreasing its state general fund portion and we're increasing tuition, we took the opportunity to take 5% of the increase in 1 year, set it aside for something we refer to as 5 for 6. We fund 6 credits for those students who don't yet have a high school diploma, so that they earn the 6 credits using a portion of the tuition increase from our institution. We had over 250 students last year who started in that way. We had about 100 of those who finished the 6 credits in the first semester and enrolled in the second term. These are people without that critical $750 would not have attended college. How many will finish? Time will tell. But think of the lives that have been transformed in this area. There is no more important work for us to be doing than to reach down and grab those at the very bottom of that caste system that we've created. Now, most of these programs are in areas where they are the entry-level certification, an industry-based credential, in construction as an example, in welding. I recently had a conversation with a couple of faculty members, math and welding. I want you to think about the amount of mathematics, geometry in particular, involved in welding. Angles. How about chemistry? The melding or welding of two pieces of metal is a chemical reaction. Think of that for a second. Here you have someone who didn't finish high school, who is learning a process that is very much at the heart of chemistry, of geometry, of many levels of mathematics. So why is it that we would separate those two? So we have students who are leaving these programs. Praxair, a great industry partner of ours, made about a $300,000 investment where we're able to bring students into a welding initiative. We have students leaving that program making $80,000 in the first year with a high school diploma and an AWS certification. Just think of that for a second. Transformational for people who previously had no hope, number one, and number two, had no idea that they could ever do in their mind what they call college. First of all, it was never talked about in their family. Secondly, they surely didn't believe that they were capable of doing it. Now their next step is, how do I return to college? Because that AWS certification isn't the end for me. The young man recently, Aaron Martinez, who finished that Praxair program and uses a feature, this young man was driving down the road one day. He owned a lawn service, had his own old junk, beat-up truck, no air conditioning, windows, try to get up as fast as he could go to get as much air going in 90-degree weather in Louisiana in the summer. And on the radio, he hears a spot that says, come down to Baton Rouge Community College and enroll in our welding program. He goes down, calls his wife first and says, cancel the afternoon yards. I'm going down to Baton Rouge Community College. And he did. 16 weeks later, he exits making $80,000 a year. 10 weeks later, when we interview him, he and his wife are buying their first home together. He now has a vehicle with an air conditioner. Important to him, right? And most importantly, here's what happened. He was employed by Turner Industries, a company that builds industrial plants all over the world, most especially along the Gulf Coast. And while he's enrolled in that, or while he's working for Turner Industries, he begins to notice that there are other jobs in those plants. Isn't it interesting that many of our industrial plants have fences around them with barbed wire at the top? Do we really want kids to know what goes on inside there? How do we describe to them the jobs that are there? This young man goes to work and he notices that the process operators who work in those plants are working in the air conditioning, number one, clean environment, and he's thinking, I want to do that. How do I get there? So the first credential gave him an opportunity that he never thought he would have. And it was the return that meant so much to he and his family. This young man's trying to build a life circumstance for himself so that he can go back and enter into that process technology program that will fundamentally change his life. So don't forget the adult population. It is absolutely, to this nation's future, it is absolutely critical. And it is a group that not only will generate a return on investment from a financial perspective, it will also create savings for this nation in a way that I don't even know we can calculate just yet. From an incarceration perspective, from a healthcare perspective, go down the list of all of the things. From a basic community health perspective, this population can fundamentally change things. So thank you for an opportunity to share a little more information with you today, and glad to answer any questions you may have.
So what I'd like to do is maybe offer one more question for John and Monty, and then let's open it up and get your questions. You all look like you are on the edge of your seats like I am. So just a really quick thing. So Monty really hit on something really critical that I think the first panel did about this idea of creating, and so did Sandy in his opening comments. This is sort of an intensive start to what we hope is a continuum for students. And so I want to have you really kind of respond to John, how has iBest cascaded across the colleges in Washington State? How have you thought about and applied it to other contexts to help students get, through their career pathway? And how do you like to think about career pathways?
Great. It's a great question. iBest started in just professional technical career programs. We then brought in, through a generous grant from the Gates Foundation, a study on developmental education. And, you know, I would say if there's one thing we need to do, it's eliminate developmental education. We did that study for 3 years, and now all pre-college students have access to iBest. It's moved into academic transfer with both the career technical and academic, taking them all the way to a 2-year degree. We then scaled that into our adult correctional facilities. I oversee all our correctional facilities. Our incarcerated adults do even better. We're now reaching down into the high school with iBest in the high school that will allow students who are at risk to stay in their high school, and all of a sudden it will do what Barbara was talking about. In iBest, all subjects are contextualized into the area of study. So all their English, math, history is about welding or is about their culinary pursuits. And it allows them to get high school credit and college credit at the same time. We're also expanding iBest into registered apprenticeship. In fact, we did the first iBest in an apprenticeship some years ago and received the Governor's Award. We took all levels of ELL students from level 1 to level 6 in a roofing apprenticeship program. 100% of the students finished the apprenticeship program and are all union workers. So imagine that life change from a level 1 ELL perspective in 2 quarters in a college program, apprenticeship program, also receiving college level credit. So what we're trying to do is really expand this into a comprehensive pathway. We're lucky that in our state, all of our 34 community and technical colleges are moving to a system of guided college and career pathways. iBest is the foundational piece of that pathway. I just heard last night, when you hear meta majors, those very broad career cluster majors, got great news from 2 of our colleges. They're putting iBest in every single meta major in their college. So I see the writing on the wall. I'm hoping that that will move in that direction. Important in that is in all of those pathways, every single class a student takes counts towards a certificate or degree. They are never required to take a class that doesn't count. And in fact, we don't approve an iBest program if they have any extra classes. And that helps with the acceleration.
So Monty, can you
Sure,
also
just
follow
a-
up on that,
just
like
a-
how the ecosystem and the pathway can help a student keep going?
A very quick indication of how our institution has changed as a result of the very things that John just described. I had a faculty member, math faculty member from a college that I worked at previously, who came to me recently and said, I've been bitten by the bug, was the way he described it. This is a gentleman that taught college algebra and was absolutely, you will not graduate with an associate degree without passing through college algebra. It was just that kind of math faculty member. He ultimately developed a relationship with the adult basic education program, taught as a part of an iBest-like model, and came back to me and he said, I'm not interested in force-feeding the 18-year-old kid that mom and dad made go to college, right? College algebra courses. I want more of the adult ed students because they're so motivated. I get up and run to class every day because these students are just absolutely eating it up. I want those students in my class. That's the transformation that happens from a mindset perspective when you not expose students to faculty, but expose faculty to students who are that motivated.
So let's go ahead, thank you both for that. Let's go ahead and open it up. Joe, you might have the microphone ready to go. I think our endurance bicyclist, Ironman participant from Denver has her first question. So thank you.
Oh, thanks for allowing me to be so curious. So our foundation in Denver, we do a lot of 2-gen poverty work. And this sounds right. I mean, I know that we've been partners with our community colleges there, and we're starting to look at it nationwide. In 2-gen poverty, when Joey comes to school hungry, we try to get Joey and his mom into this kind of program. Can you please share with us your marketing for low-income families to understand that Joey's mom has a place in your adult learning institution? And can you share with us your work with HHS, maybe the earned income tax credit people, and what you're doing on those realms to know that people are welcome at your institutions, and what does that look like? Paint that picture for us.
Sure. Let me begin with just a quick, if you're not familiar with the single stop model, I would encourage you to take a look at some of what's going on around single stop, because I think it hits at much of the same population that you're describing. This is a group that operates very much by word of mouth. What we found initially when we began to try to advertise these programs was that we used media, and we found one effective media outlet: radio. Really kind of an interesting set of circumstances when you think about the media effort that we have had in the past for advertising our colleges as a whole. Radio was a part of it, but it wasn't the focus. Radio became a really important component for this population. The second point, though, became social organizations, churches as an example. You can access this population from churches. Remember, the old notion of going down to the high school and recruiting the graduating class, that's out the window with this population, right? You can't just find them gathered in a single place in the community. But when you go to the churches, don't expect to find the population that you want to enroll. Expect to find their grandmother, their neighbor, their aunt, their uncle. You're going to find the family members who say, hey, I know someone who will be interested in this program. So I would just encourage you to think about marketing the program in terms of where you're marketing them in that way. But the other important point is what you're marketing. You have to find a way to frame the discussion in a way that it's not viewed as another tired, old education program. It's about transforming people's lives.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on that. We're just launching quite a big campaign all through social media. What we've found is that social media gets to the children and to the adults. We started this with some work through SEIU, which is one of our allied health unions in the state. When they started talking about there are more smartphones on the planet than there are toothbrushes. And what happens in social media is exactly what Monty was talking about, is that we know none of our other efforts have really worked in marketing. Little bits, but that word of mouth does with this population. And that social media means that I can send that out to everyone in my Facebook, everyone on my chat, and it's no longer us advertising. It's the students that have been successful.
So you can tell we're pretty action-oriented at Mortgage Family Foundation. So talk to me about what's the minimally viable entry point for like an iBest model in a community, and is it a United Way? Is it a talk about that, please?
Are you asking where students come from?
No, if we wanted to start this in Colorado, if we wanted to start to create something similar.
Well, let me tell you that we've already been contacted by some individuals in Colorado thinking about having some help move into iBest. It really is with the community colleges. I think because they're going to be able to identify those pathways that count. And remember, that's what's important, that these add up and define a very clear pathway that shows every place a student can exit, what certificate they will need, how much they can earn, and what the name of that job is. And what that does is so often students think, I'll just get to this first part. But I've worked with thousands and thousands of iBest students. Usually they get to that first part and they say, I didn't know I'm smart. and they continue. They continue to work, and they continue to move up, because what they've been told all of their life is they're not smart enough.
So while you're thinking about your next question, I know we're kind of standing between us and lunch. What I'd like to do is ask both John and Monty a little bit more directly, how can philanthropy and the folks here help support the work to move underprepared adult learners into careers and career pathways that matter?
I'll begin. The first is, don't be afraid to target this population. Don't be afraid, with all of the other priorities that are out there educationally, K-12, early childhood education, don't be afraid to make adult basic education and the adult learner a priority within your organization. Because I've got to tell you, you're going to have a greater impact, generational impact, as you talked about a second ago, with that adult learner, or some combination of those different areas in education, than you will, I believe, in any other. And the community and technical colleges are the place to make those investments.
I would say first and foremost is to demand, what is the return on investment? What is the return on investment for the individual and for the taxpayer? I would then say to really support training and implementation in programming that guarantees they're going to continue this work when that money goes away, and have a plan, a solid plan for scaling that up. I would also want us all to think about, across our nation, we have several evidence-based methods that are very proven. I think we need to join together and scale what we know is working, rather than begin more smaller boutique programs that when the funding goes away, so does that program.
So, Joe, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, feel free to end a couple minutes early.
Sure.
But
Well,
but if you have a great question, continue.
Yep.
Okay.
So and as I was hoping that this would be okay with you, I'm going to take a moderator prerogative and actually chime in too, having been part of this work for many years.
Absolutely,
And wondered in terms also about kind of how the philanthropic community can support this work. I actually think that there are three things. Number one, longer-term investment cycles. You know, I know we think about life in terms of 3 or 4 year projects. To me, a common theme that both Sandy talked about, I know the work that we've been doing with John and with Monty and others across these really important states, these take like 8, 10, 12 years to really play out to make the systems change possible. But then kind of once you start and they do, then they do. And, you know, I think seeding the money at the beginning is helpful, but then staying with the problem to help fix it more longer term, I think would be amazing. Secondly, there are still many students that are what we consider significantly underprepared, like maybe below the 6th grade level. There's so few national initiatives or state-based initiatives really addressing this group of students. And I think that with so few models or funding, I mean, it's not the hot thing to fund, you know, this kind of group. There's got to be more, I think, around that. And then, as John mentioned, number 3, how can we take then some of these evidence-based practices we know from sound research that Davis and others have put into it, and really try to make sure that they're working in other communities, still knowing that there's a local context we've got to be adaptable and flexible around. So, and then 30 seconds, Joe, one more quick thing. So, John and Monty, really quick, what I consider my, you know, Jeopardy popcorn round here. What do you think is the future? What, as you look ahead, what's around the corner for this adult population, this kind of work, these career pathway starters type things? So,
Sure.
What's around the corner?
Yeah. From my perspective, it's just what John said a second ago, it's scale. In Louisiana, we started this effort 6 years ago. This past year, we had 3,600 adults who started in our colleges with no high school diploma who finished a college credential. We've got to take that to scale. Some would say 3,600 is scale. It's not scale with 600,000 adults in our state. So continuing to focus on scale and targeting the dollars in a way that continues to make that progress so that we're on a trajectory to meet workforce demands.
I agree. Taking it to scale, but on a very guided college and career pathway. Very, very guided.